The skyscrapers of Riven Enterprises, sharp and defiant, clawed at the heavens, their silhouettes etching stark lines against the sprawling New York skyline. Inside, the corporate machinery churned with ruthless efficiency, where success was a cold equation of profit and power. Employees scurried through the labyrinthine corridors, their lives a blur of deadlines and directives, oblivious to the world beyond their cubicles. At the apex of this concrete jungle resided Damien Frost, the CEO of Riven Enterprises. Damien, a man in his mid-50s, was a study in calculated severity, renowned for his tailored suits, acerbic wit, and an emotional detachment that bordered on glacial. From his corner office, a panoramic vista of Manhattan spread out before him, reinforcing his sense of invulnerability. Like clockwork, he stood by the window each morning, surveying the ant-like figures below, their lives inconsequential to him, so long as the company's bottom line continued its relentless ascent. The rhythmic cadence of his thoughts was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was Emily, his ever-timid assistant, reminding him of the impending board meeting. Damien, with his customary lack of warmth, barely acknowledged her before striding out. The meeting, as anticipated, was a master class in control. Damien didn't merely lead, he dominated. There was no room for dissenting opinions, no space for empathy. When a hesitant executive dared to voice concerns about the workforce being stretched to its breaking point, Damien silenced him with a withering glance. "We need results, not excuses. If they can't handle the pressure, they're expendable." As the meeting concluded, and the executives filed out, Damien returned to his office, passing the evening cleaning crew. Among them was Samuel Green, a man nearing 60, whose hands, worn and calloused, moved with practiced efficiency as he guided his cleaning cart. Dressed in a simple, unassuming uniform, Samuel was a quiet, diligent presence, utterly unremarkable to the building's inhabitants. Yet, beneath the veneer of ordinariness, Samuel was anything but ordinary. That evening, as Samuel meticulously emptied waste bins and wiped down desks, two junior executives whispered in the break room, "Did you hear about the latest firings? Frost canned the entire marketing team because their campaign flopped." "Typical Damien," the other replied, "he doesn't care about anyone." Samuel overheard their conversation, his expression unchanged, his eyes taking in every detail with a sharp, almost predatory focus. The days that followed saw the tension within Riven Enterprises escalate. Damien's demands grew increasingly unreasonable, pushing employees to their limits. Layoffs loomed like a specter, casting a pall over the office, and the workforce toiled in a state of perpetual anxiety. One evening, as Samuel was finishing his shift, Damien's voice, laced with vitriol, echoed through the executive wing. Samuel, mopping the nearby floor, overheard Damien's brutal reprimand of an employee on the phone, "I don't care about your family emergency. If you don't close that deal by tomorrow, don't bother coming back." Samuel paused, his grip tightening on the mop handle. The harshness of the voice, the sheer inhumanity of the words, stirred something deep within him. But, without a word, he resumed his task. Weeks later, Riven Enterprises hosted its annual gala at a lavish downtown hotel. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and designer attire, as the city's elite mingled and toasted to the company's success. Damien, surrounded by his coterie of power brokers, reveled in the adulation, his arrogance on full display. Samuel, a phantom among the guests, moved through the crowd with trays of hors d'oeuvres and champagne. As the night wore on, Damien, emboldened by champagne, publicly humiliated a young catering staff member for a minor mishap, reducing her to tears. Samuel, observing from across the room, felt a surge of anger, but maintained his composure. Later, as Samuel navigated the crowded room with a tray of wine glasses, an accidental collision sent him stumbling. The tray tilted, and a cascade of red wine splattered across Damien's pristine white suit. Time seemed to suspend itself. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on Damien, his face contorted with rage. "You clumsy fool!" he bellowed, his voice slicing through the silence. "Do you have any idea how much this suit costs? It's probably worth more than your entire year's salary. You're worthless, a janitor who can't even perform a simple task." Samuel, his posture unwavering, met Damien's gaze. "It was an accident, sir. I apologize." But Damien was beyond reason, his ego inflamed by the alcohol and the watchful eyes of his guests. "You're fired. I don't want to see your face in this building again, is that clear?" A heavy silence settled over the room as Samuel calmly placed the tray on a nearby table. He glanced around, noting the mixture of discomfort and morbid fascination on the guests' faces. Without another word, Samuel nodded, "Understood." Damien smirked, satisfied, and turned back to the crowd, attempting to salvage his composure. But the damage was done. Samuel exited the ballroom, his steps measured and deliberate. In the staff area, as Samuel changed out of his uniform, Sarah, the head of HR, approached him. "Samuel, I'm so sorry about what happened. That was uncalled for." Samuel offered a faint smile. "Thank you, but there's no need to apologize. Sometimes, it's just time to move on." Sarah frowned, sensing a hidden depth beneath Samuel's quiet demeanor, but refrained from pressing him. "If you need anything, a reference or someone to talk to, you know where to find me." Samuel nodded, appreciating her kindness. As he left the building, a quiet determination settled over him. His time at Riven Enterprises had come to an end, but this was merely the prelude to something far more significant. Days later, a different kind of storm was brewing. A criminal organization, led by the ruthless Victor Novak, had set its sights on Riven Enterprises. Novak, a shadowy figure in the underworld, was known for using legitimate businesses as fronts for money laundering and illicit operations. And Riven Enterprises, with its vast network of connections, was the perfect target for their latest scheme. Victor, seated in a dimly lit room surrounded by his lieutenants, outlined the plan. "We'll start by showing Damien Frost that he's not untouchable. We'll hit him where it hurts. If he cooperates, we move in. If not..." Victor tapped the side of his gun. "We'll take control by force." The following morning, Damien arrived at his office, his mind already racing with thoughts of expansion and profit margins. As he settled into his chair, Emily entered, carrying a letter marked urgent. Damien snatched it from her hand and tore it open. The contents of the letter sent a chill down his spine. It was a direct threat, detailing Riven's financial dealings that skirted the law. The demand was simple: a substantial sum of money transferred to an untraceable account, or face severe consequences. Damien's initial shock quickly morphed into rage. "It's a bluff," he snarled, crumpling the letter. "Some lowlife trying to scam us. Increase security, but don't waste my time with this nonsense." But it wasn't nonsense. Over the next few days, the threats escalated. More letters arrived, each one more detailed and menacing. Employees reported being followed home, and strange men were spotted lurking near the office. The tension within Riven Enterprises reached a fever pitch. One evening, as Damien worked late in his office, the building's lights flickered and died, plunging the floors into darkness. The emergency generators kicked in, casting an eerie glow through the corridors. Moments later, the elevator doors slid open, and men in tactical gear stormed the building, weapons drawn. "This is a takeover," one of the masked men announced, his voice calm but menacing. "Cooperate, and no one gets hurt." Damien, frozen in disbelief, watched as the men fanned out, rounding up the terrified employees. In the chaos, Sarah, the head of HR, remembered Samuel. With trembling hands, she pulled out her phone, praying for a signal. To her relief, she found one bar. She dialed Samuel's number. Miles away, Samuel's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, recognizing the number. "Sarah," he answered, his voice steady. "Samuel, I know this is strange, but we're in trouble. The company, we're being held hostage. I don't know why, but I felt I had to call you." Samuel listened quietly, his expression hardening as Sarah explained the situation. "I'll be there soon," he said, his voice firm. The quiet, unassuming janitor was gone. In his place, the former operative began to emerge once again. Within minutes, Samuel was driving towards Riven Enterprises, his mind shifting gears. As he approached, he parked a block away, out of sight, and observed the building. His trained eyes quickly identified potential entry points and weaknesses in the criminals' setup. He recognized their tactics. They were professionals, but so was he. Samuel moved swiftly and silently, making his way to a service entrance. Using a sleeper hold, he incapacitated the guard stationed there, without making a sound. Inside the building, he navigated the hallways with ease, utilizing the knowledge he had gained from years of working as a janitor. Reaching the security room, Samuel accessed the camera feeds, scanning for information. What he saw confirmed his suspicions. The hostage takers were well organized and heavily armed. He noted the number of hostages, their locations, and the positions of the intruders. Samuel didn't hesitate. He located a hidden cache of equipment he had stashed away for emergencies during his time at the company. As he geared up, a familiar sense of calm washed over him. This was what he was trained for. Moving floor by floor, Samuel took down the criminals with precision and efficiency. Each takedown was swift, silent, and methodical. The hostages remained unaware, their fear keeping them paralyzed as Samuel eliminated the threats around them. As his one-man assault continued, word spread among the hostage-takers that something was amiss. Men were disappearing, communications were breaking down, and fear began to creep in. In the command center, Victor grew increasingly agitated as reports of missing men flooded in. "Find out what's going on," he barked, but it was too late. Samuel was always one step ahead, using the criminals' fear against them. By the time Victor realized what was happening, Samuel had already cleared most of the building. The final confrontation took place in Damien's office. Samuel, with his years of training, burst in, catching Victor off guard. In a blur of movement, the two men grappled. Though Victor was strong, Samuel was stronger, his skills honed by years of experience. Within minutes, Samuel had Victor pinned to the ground, his reign of terror over. As the police stormed the building and apprehended the remaining criminals, Damien, still in shock, stared at Samuel, realizing the magnitude of his misjudgment. "Samuel, I don't understand. Who are you?" Damien asked, his voice trembling. Samuel, calm and composed, offered a small smile, just a man doing what needed to be done. The next morning, as the sun rose over the city, Damien, a changed man, stood alone in his office. The events of the night had forced him to re-evaluate everything he thought he knew about power, success, and, most importantly, about people. Samuel, however, had already vanished into the early morning crowd, ready for whatever challenge might come next. A few days later, Damien sat in his office, reviewing the quarterly financial reports. The numbers were adequate, but not enough for him. As he pondered ways to boost profits, Emily knocked and entered, carrying a letter marked urgent. Damien, irritated by the interruption, tore it open. The letter's contents sent a chill through him. It wasn't just any letter, it was a threat. The anonymous sender knew every detail of the company's financial records, including some of the less-than-legal activities that Damien had carefully concealed. The demand was clear: transfer a large sum of money to an untraceable account, or face severe consequences. Damien's initial shock quickly turned to rage. "They're bluffing," he muttered, crumpling the letter. "Some lowlife thinks they can threaten me." Without informing anyone, Damien increased security around the building, dismissing the threat as a mere nuisance. But the threats persisted. Over the next few days, more letters arrived, each one more detailed and ominous. Employees reported strange men loitering around the building, and some even mentioned feeling like they were being followed. The tension within Riven Enterprises was palpable. But Damien remained stubborn, determined not to yield to the demands. He believed it was all an empty threat, a ploy to intimidate him into paying. What Damien didn't realize was that this wasn't a game. He was being targeted by a dangerous criminal organization, led by Victor Novak, a man known for his ruthless tactics and iron-fisted control. And Novak had chosen Riven Enterprises as his next target. The situation escalated quickly. One night, as Damien worked late in his office, the building's lights flickered and died. The emergency lights flickered to life, casting the office in a dim, sterile glow. Before Damien could react, the elevator doors opened, and men in tactical gear stormed the building. "Everybody down!" one of the men shouted, brandishing a rifle. The remaining employees froze in fear. Sarah, who was working late as well, ducked behind her desk, her heart pounding. The masked men, their movements precise and efficient, swept through the building, rounding up the employees and herding them into the main lobby. In the chaos, Sarah reached for her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed the only person she thought could help, Samuel. Miles away, in his small apartment, Samuel was reading when his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the caller ID and answered immediately. "Samuel, I don't know what's happening, but we're being held hostage at the office." Sarah's voice trembled. "There are men with guns, and they've taken control of the building." Samuel's face hardened as he listened. "Stay calm. I'm coming." The quiet, unassuming janitor was gone. In his place was a man who had experienced more danger than most people could ever imagine. Samuel didn't hesitate. He quickly gathered a bag of supplies he had kept for emergencies. Old habits from his time in the military die hard, and Samuel had never truly left that life behind, even when he tried. He drove towards Riven Enterprises, his mind laser-focused on the task at hand. As he neared the building, he parked a few blocks away, observing the scene from a distance. Police were beginning to gather, but they had no idea what was happening inside. Samuel knew time was running out. Using his knowledge of the building's layout from his years as a janitor, Samuel made his way towards a service entrance, avoiding the main entrances where Novak's men were undoubtedly stationed. His movements were swift and calculated, each step deliberate. He neutralized a guard at the service entrance, rendering him unconscious without making a sound. Inside, the once familiar building was now hostile territory. But Samuel knew every corner, every hidden passage. He moved through the darkened corridors, his senses heightened, his mind formulating a plan. Reaching the security room, Samuel accessed the camera feeds, studying the situation. What he saw confirmed his worst fears. The hostage-takers were professionals, heavily armed, and well-coordinated. But there was something else. Novak, the leader, had taken Damien as his personal hostage, isolating him from the other employees. Samuel knew this was more than just a robbery. Novak wanted control of the company, and Damien was his leverage. Samuel quickly retrieved the equipment he had hidden in a maintenance closet, tools and weapons he had stashed away for an emergency like this. Armed and ready, Samuel set out to take control of the situation, one step at a time. Floor by floor, Samuel systematically took down the hostage-takers. His movements were efficient, silent, and precise. He used his military training to stay one step ahead of the criminals, never giving them a chance to regroup. The hostages remained oblivious, unaware that their rescuer was moving through the building, eliminating the threats around them. Back in the command center, Novak grew increasingly frustrated. His men were reporting strange disappearances, and communications were breaking down. What the hell is going on? Novak demanded, slamming his fist on the table. His lieutenant shrugged, fear creeping into his voice. We don't know, boss. Men are just disappearing. Novak's eyes narrowed. Find out who's doing this and take care of it now. But Samuel was already ahead of them. He continued his silent assault, using the criminals' fear against them. They had come prepared for a simple takeover, but Samuel was turning their plan upside down. Meanwhile, in the main lobby, Sarah and a group of terrified employees huddled together, trying to stay out of sight. The masked men patrolled the room, their rifles slung across their chests, their eyes scanning for any sign of trouble. But they didn't see Samuel. He used a small mirror to create a diversion, reflecting light into one of the guards' eyes. As the man moved to investigate, Samuel struck. Within seconds, 3 guards were down, and the hostages stared in stunned silence. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief as she recognized the figure standing before her. Samuel, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Samuel turned to her, placing a finger to his lips. Keep quiet, he instructed, his voice calm but firm. He quickly ushered the group of employees into a safer area, giving them brief instructions on how to stay hidden. Then, without another word, he disappeared back into the shadows, ready to finish what he had started. By now, Novak's men were panicking. Communication had completely broken down, and they had no idea where Samuel was or how he was taking them down. In the command center, Novak paced back and forth, his frustration boiling over. We need to end this now, he shouted, his voice echoing through the room. I don't care who's out there, find him and kill him. But it was too late. Samuel had already thinned out their numbers, and the remaining criminals were huddled together for protection. Their fear made them reckless, and Samuel took full advantage. He moved through the building like a ghost, using every skill he had learned during his time in the special forces. He anticipated their moves, used their own tactics against them, and systematically dismantled their operation. In Damien's office, Novak was growing desperate. He knew something was terribly wrong. The situation was spiraling out of control, and it wasn't supposed to be like this. He had planned for every contingency, or so he thought. But now, it felt like everything was slipping through his fingers. The final confrontation was inevitable. Samuel knew it, and so did Novak. As Samuel approached Damien's office, he could hear Novak's agitated voice through the door. Where is he? Novak demanded. How can one man be causing all this? Samuel took a deep breath, steeling himself. This was it. The final step. With a swift motion, Samuel burst through the office door, catching Novak off guard. The room froze for a split second. Damien sat tied to a chair, his face bruised and his eyes wide with shock. Novak, gun in hand, stared at Samuel, momentarily stunned. You! Novak spat, raising his gun. Samuel moved quickly, rolling to the side as Novak fired 2 shots. The bullets missed, embedding themselves into the wall behind him. Samuel crouched behind a large filing cabinet, his mind racing. Who the hell are you? Novak snarled, his gun trained on Samuel's position. Samuel's voice was calm as he replied, "Just the janitor." Novak's face twisted with rage. "The janitor? You've got to be kidding me." His voice dripping with disbelief. But Samuel remained calm. Crouched behind the filing cabinet, he could hear the unsteadiness in Novak's breath, the slight tremble in his voice. The man wasn't as composed as he appeared. "You're outmatched," Samuel said, his voice even. "Your men are down. The police will be here any minute. It's over." But Novak wasn't the type to surrender easily. "You think you're so clever," he barked. "I still have the CEO. He's my leverage. As long as I have him, I'm in control." Samuel could hear the desperation in Novak's words. He was losing his grip, and both men knew it. But that didn't make him any less dangerous. Novak still had Damien, and if things went sideways, he wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger. "You're trapped," Samuel said, his tone soft but calculated. "Look at your situation. You can't escape this building. Your plan has fallen apart, and your men are either unconscious or gone. There's no escape." Samuel knew he had to disarm Novak, whose gun was still aimed at Damien. Novak, defiant, boasted of facing worse situations, but Samuel used this bravado to distract him. He emphasized Damien was now a liability, not leverage. A sudden lunge over the filing cabinet allowed Samuel to disarm Novak, their struggle ending with Novak subdued and zip-tied. Damien, shaken, questioned Samuel's identity. Samuel, before the police sirens arrived, simply said they'd talk later. As Samuel led Novak out, Sarah expressed disbelief at Samuel's abilities, which he brushed off as experience. Damien, realizing his past arrogance, apologized to Samuel, who emphasized that everyone has a story. Damien offered Samuel a security position, but Samuel declined, hinting at other messes needing cleaning up. News of the rescue spread, but Samuel vanished. Damien, reflecting on his near loss and Samuel's heroism, recognized the need for change at Riven Enterprises. He initiated employee support programs and a shift in leadership style. Samuel, seeking temporary peace, retreated to a cabin. A call from Grace, a former Special Forces teammate, drew him back into action. They were facing a human trafficking ring. Samuel, despite his desire for a quiet life, agreed to help. Back at Riven, employees noted Damien's changed behavior, some skeptical of its sincerity. Damien, overhearing their doubts, acknowledged his past mistakes and the long road to redemption. Samuel prepared for his mission, gathering gear. He met Grace and Ethan, another former teammate, and they planned to extract an inside man, Luis, and infiltrate a warehouse. The operation began at dawn. Luis was successfully extracted, providing crucial information. At the warehouse, a firefight erupted. Samuel and Ethan freed captives while Grace provided cover. The leader, Delgado, held a hostage at gunpoint, but Samuel's precise shot ended the threat. With the traffickers apprehended, Samuel, Grace, and Ethan watched as authorities took over. Despite the victory, Samuel knew more battles lay ahead. He acknowledged their work was never truly done, and prepared to face whatever came next.